want to ask you first about the food that's prepared and kind of where it's prepared, because Amnon says to David, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight so I may eat from her hand." And so she goes down, she took dough, she kneads it, and she makes cakes and baked the cakes. So the first question is this line of "in my sight." What is this telling us about the situation? Is this just like he wants a power control if he wants to see her doing this? Or is this informing us like of the spatial categories of this text?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little both. I think, from what the rest of the text says, it sounds like there's probably some sort of palace compound, and that Amnon, as the crown prince, has his own dwelling or part of, the compound or what have you. And that, when he's faking being ill,
right,
when David is, of course, rightly concerned about him because he is the crown prince. And when he comes down to visit him and he says, he basically, what can I do for you? Of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but, and when Amnon says that that's what he wants, and David's like, oh, okay, sure. So it doesn't seem, at least, totally off hand, because she is his sister. And although technically you wouldn't, be alone with a man that's not who's related to you or your husband in this world, it didn't seem off to David to be okay with that request. So he allows it. So when he wants to see her make it, I don't know if that means just come down to my house and make it, or does that mean like I just want to, watch her do this, which is just kind of creepy, but
yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, and if you think about your typical Iron Age house, and it's hard to imagine if elite houses would have been exactly the same. But typically, you would be sleeping on the second floor of the house, and your oven and your food preparations would be on the bottom floor of the house. So it's a little difficult to say like what exactly that could have looked like, especially since archaeologically we don't know what the David's palace looked like. But I mean, he I guess he could have been laying on the first floor watching her, or maybe the palace, his house was set up a little bit differently. It's kind of hard to say, but David didn't seem to think there was something wrong with that, which gives some people pause to possibly wonder, okay, did Tamar have a more of a role in the household and in the royal household than we typically think?
And I want to jump right on that question, because it does feel like, on the one hand, that household role can maybe explain some of what, and if we know how this story ends. So when we're reading from the beginning, you see these things and you start to go, uh-oh. But if you put yourself in a situation where you don't know, understanding some of the household materials or the household layouts can maybe say, okay, I could see why David, why would you say yes? He's asking for his sister to come, and what's household and who does food may be some apologetics for David, maybe for some people, of why this happens. But with the role that she has, is it just a sisterly role, or is there another role that she could be fulfilling when she comes down to make this food for him that's available to her?
Yeah, so it's been argued that it talks about like what she's wearing, which also you normally don't get that either. So it says and the way it's often translated is a tunic with long sleeves. Yeah. And the only other time that word is used is when it's referring to Joseph's coat, right? Which is typically translated as a coat of many colors. And here it's translated as a tunic with long sleeves. So it's a bit of a, okay, how should we translate both of these? And so some people have argued that the tunic with long sleeves indicates some sort of, royal status. which then would, be symbolic of Joseph's future kind of status. But it's also been argued that maybe as, the virginal daughter of the king, that, she had some sort of like household kind of religious role. I mean, not like an official priest or anything, but that maybe, within the household and religious and healing, and women were typically related with, midwifery and healing and medicinal stuff, actions. So it's not entirely unheard of that was maybe possibly her role. Or, also there's the thing about, women overseeing the food. So it's like, oh, okay, well, let's get one of the women. Oh, he's asking for a specific woman. Okay, let's, get her down here. So, and we don't get any indication of what Tamar is thinking. I mean, she goes down there and she doesn't, but we don't hear, she doesn't have a voice until he assaults her.
We don't get her inner monologue leading down into this scene.
Right.
But it is, again, as with the story of the Jacob and Esau situation, a complicated food story that the more you unwrap some of these layers of the household dynamics and who does what, seemingly makes this plan between the two of them all the more, unfortunately, plausible. That you're asking for a sister and you're asking for maybe somebody who has this kind of cultic role in the household already, and that it just sets the trap layer upon layer so that it's all the more likely that she will come into essentially the layer here to be assaulted, which makes the story so much, it's so much sadder the more you look into of the ways that the end result, as it is heartbreaking already. But the more we understand about the ancient world and how they may be playing on her role or manipulating her through the things that she's supposed to do, just informs more of the perspective in this and why the reaction to this story is what it is, because it stacks layer upon layer of the assault that has happened. It is against her, and it is against the household, and against a sibling, and against potentially someone who oversees ritual in the household, that this thing continues to grow, and the spiral of David's household just gets out of control. On the note of her coat and her robes here, with the cake that she makes, because normally it's just translated as cakes, but the word that gets used here is a unique word, right?
Oat, yeah. Yeah. So it can be, it's oftentimes translated as cakes, but it really just says, made this particular dish, right? And it really has its root in the Hebrew word for heart. And so some people think, they're cakes that are maybe heart-shaped. And, I think about that and I think, well, there are other indicators in the text that, make it sound like, well, maybe it's more of like a hearty, where it gets the word heart, but hearty, kind of like a hearty dish. Like the way I think of it is, when we get sick, a lot of people want chicken soup. Right. So maybe this is a particular meal that is made when somebody is feeling poorly. And again, remember, in this world, you get sick, there's the chance of it just being something minor is nothing like today. So you can understand David's concern. And so if David is concerned and Amnon wants the woman of the household who is in charge of healing, who is does healing stuff, and could make a meal that would help with the healing, then you could understand why they would be like, oh yeah, okay, let's get this. We don't want the crown prince to die. Right. The line is in danger here. The household ritual side of it, though, I think does open up this other lane of understanding how we should be reading this text, because the Bible describes maybe one set of practices that should be followed, but there's always the question of, is this really what's happening? And this household religious cult that she may be participating in
can feed into the understanding of why ask for this meal, why ask for the hearty dumplings that may be that special thing ritually that can help bring him back. Because if he dies, the prince dies, what happens to the household?
But there's no temple yet either.
Right.
So we always have to make that distinction between, official sanctioned religious practices and the unofficial kind of household, everyday people, religious activities. And again, this is, early on in Israel's monarchy, temple's not built yet. And even when the temple is built, it does seem like from other archaeological studies and other textual studies from, that women did play a role in household religious practices. And so the fact that she is possibly one of these in the royal household, it's not terribly surprising, at least to me.